To go to the 11th or the whatever.
Right.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back. As we just mentioned off the record, we're going to go through three of the articles that we have some updates on. The first one that I have is Article 14. This is an article that was previously put into the TA list on June the 30th. And we have a minor change that you'll see here. The change from the prior draft is 3C, because this changes it to Civil Service Director or designee instead of the Commission, which is just a function of timing and being able to get things through promptly. And we don't think that has an adverse effect on anybody's expectations or rights or anything else. And so it's really a matter of expediency. Even though it's a departure from the prior TA, we'd ask you to consider it and see if
Okay.
we can set that one aside. Article 19 on assignment changes will be the next one we'll put up. And the first change is in section 2B. We have some deleted language there from the prior agreement, and we are proposing to move that into policy. In order to achieve the department's objective of increased and impartial transfer opportunities, all vacancies shall be filled in accordance with the department's transfer policy. On the special event assignments in section 5, you had proposed a number of additional specific listed items. We have provided a definition here to include a pre-planned event, which by its nature is likely to result in a larger than normal number of attendees or spectators, that requires officers to staff areas and/or conduct road closures in an effort to maintain the safety of the public and attendees, as determined at the discretion of the chief. The following non-exclusive list of events are considered special events. I believe the ones we have listed are the ones that are already in the agreement. And we have struck through the others that you had on the list there, although I'm informed that many, if not all of those, would qualify under that definition. We just don't see the need to have the big, long list. We think that the combination of the definition and the examples really solves the problem. Under department overtime policies, which is sub C in that section, we propose to take out the language allowing lieutenants to work overtime in an overtime capacity for positions that are required for span of control at reimbursed events. The city has no conceptual opposition to being able to pay overtime for reimbursed events, but we've been informed that because they're exempt positions, that that's something that we cannot continue to do. That's all the changes in that proposed article. The next item I'll put up is Article 25. And this one is quite simple. You have proposed language on the payment of accrued sick leave for these individuals that were moved into the APD system a long time ago, and we're accepting your language as you have proposed it.
Actually, the deletion of the.
The deletion, not the language you proposed, but the deletion you proposed. And this took a little longer than we originally thought in terms of getting a grasp on how many individuals this affected. Because of the language that's being deleted for any reason other than retirement, it actually doesn't affect a really large number of people, and so it's acceptable. And I think that resolves all the issues in that article and should make it a TA.
That's yours?
Thank you for your
All right.
attention and feedback on that when you get a
Yep.
chance to look at them.
Yeah, we'll look at them.
There'll be feedback on that.
Yeah. Michael? Oh, there he is. tried to turn that notification deal off, and I can't figure it out.
You need to get
But I
those
looked
young
in my,
people to do it.
I looked in my Cricut, and I couldn't find any instructions. It keeps being, and I keep going in silence and stuff, and I can't figure out how to stop it.
You jitterbug.
I jitterbug, got big letters. I need all right, are y'all ready?
We are ready indeed.
All right, and I'll send you all this in a Word document here in a minute. It's pretty simple. We listened to what you said you were interested in, and we're not in concept opposed to the two things that you wanted modified. Now, setting aside your other political positions, we, under our Office of Police Monitor, we had a list of things of which the monitor could do and some limitations. But one of the things that you wanted us to look at was the power of the OPO to conduct investigations, okay? So I'll just read it for public consumption because not everybody can see it on the screen. So this would set up a new language. It says, in the event the OPO director requests the authority to conduct an investigation of potential police misconduct, the OPO director must submit a written request and receive written approval from the city manager to conduct said investigation. The written request must provide specific articulable facts that a policy violation has occurred and that an internal affairs investigation has not been requested, is currently ongoing, or concluded. When we asked you to define the role of the OPO, you said she is I'm using the word she, but pronoun, but she is an agent of the city manager. She's not independent, she's an agent. So if the OPO believes that something that's not being investigated and feels that there's some need for her office to do that, then she needs to request to the person she's representing, which is the city manager, that this investigation is required. You can lay out what that requirement is, because if it's already at the police department, she has a role in it and are ongoing. But if this is something to say something happened and nobody's willing to look into it, she has a right to ask her boss, I'd like to look into this case, and he can tell her yes or no. You know. Let me go ahead and I'll do both, and then you can.
Sure, thank you.
All right. So the second part, if you'll drop down to, it's in F, the new F in ours, which is access to investigative reviews. We have language in there that pretty much already has, the OPO office is already involved in being in the room during interviews, and we already have language that talks about the questions. We provided some language that that if they provide questions and for some reason those questions are not answered or doesn't respond, so we have the current system. So let's show you what we added about this right to ask questions. In the event the OPO is not satisfied with the explanation provided by IAD for the exclusion of questions requested by the OPO may proceed with the question at the time the interview resumes, because they would bring questions, or they break, and then the OPO may say, look, I want you to ask them these other questions. They'll agree, you go back in, but let's say the IAD says those aren't relevant questions and I don't wish to do it. The subject officer and our witness officer shall not be compelled to answer questions posed by the OPO at any point during the internal affairs interview, at any time in the IAD, in which IAD, the officer, the APA representative, or the officer's legal representative, determines the OPO questioning to exceed the scope of the investigation or constitutes a violation of the officer's rights, they may terminate the interview. So, in layman's terms, A police officer is only subordinate to the chief of police. Nobody, the manager cannot go down and reprimand or discipline or tell a police officer what to do. Now, he can hire and fire chiefs until somebody does, but that's the state of the law. So, now, and if I misspeak on this, I got our two experts here. Basically, they bring the questions from the OPO, or they can write them down during the interview and say, I think these things need to be asked. And the IED officer can say, okay, and ask them. But if the event that the investigator says those aren't questions, let's make some, you want to ask questions about some prior case that's not involved here or something, and they just want to know, well, then they're welcome to ask the question. But they have no authority over the police because there's no internal affairs investigator issuing you an order to speak against your self-interest. So just like the FBI says, I'd like to talk to you, and you say, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk to you. So you can ask the questions, but we can't authorize someone to order someone to answer a question. Now, can the chief do it? Yes, he can. He say she asked and the officer says that I'm not going to answer it, then they can take it to the chief, and the chief says I'm going to order the officer to answer it. Well, then that's the process today. So you want to speak and you don't want to get approval, or you can't get approval, well, then go ahead and ask. The officer may answer. You may not care, but you can't compel someone to answer to lay people just because they want to know the answer. And like we said before, we don't know who the people are coming. We don't know what their investigative skills are. We don't know if they read the case. They may just be lay people who just ask a question because they think they'd like to know. But these are internal affairs investigations. This is in the control of the police department as required by law. So if the department looking at this a rule violation believes that those questions aren't warranted and they don't want to do it as part of their job, well, then the lay person, the OPO, can ask if they want to ask. It's okay, but you can't require someone to answer questions and make that mandatory without the authority of the chief of police. That's gives you what you said you wanted.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I think what you just said was it's an investigation and control of the police department as required by law.
That's correct.
So,
For apartment rule violation. There's nobody else, the DA, U.S. Attorney, nobody can investigate the police on department rule violations but the chief of police. That's all we're talking about.
okay, so absent a contract,
Absent
you
a
don't
con-
think under 143 a representative of the municipality could?
No. Let me tell you, you can ask anything you want to ask.
No,
You
I-
can't compel. The city manager cannot compel any officer to do anything, period.
So you're only talking about that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Inside this period,
No, it's just the way it was put, so.
well, I understand, but, and like I say, we may know too much information in trying to explain it, but the chief representative at the table, any of us, can ask questions. Perhaps they missed something, maybe. But if you're there and you're the OPO rep and you think, well, I want you to ask this question, I'm just making stuff up, and you say, your internal affairs said that's not relevant, that would be a violation, that exceeds the scope of this, it's got to come up somewhere else. I'm not going to ask it, I think, and you can ask if you want. The officer may say, sure, here's the answer. Or he may say, no, I don't wish to answer that, and leave. Now, if the chief decides later, you can go see the chief. Chief say, look, I agree with you, and you order the question to be asked. Then you have to answer.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
trying to
just
make
sort-
sure we're on the
Just
same.
referencing compelled testimony. That's it.
And that's all he's talking about
Yeah.
in relation to that.
That's
That's
right.
exactly the
Yeah.
question I was going
So-
to, thank you, Jessica.
Now, politically, if they think there are questions that weren't done, then that is inside the oversight process. They can complain about it. They can put it in their report. They can send it to the mayor and council. They can send it to the chief. But we can't authorize somebody to compel testimony that has no authority to do that and can't be given that authority without the chief saying, I'm ordering you to answer that question.
No, I think. I get
Okay,
it.
all right. And that's all, because we think that meets what you said you wanted.
I don't have any other questions.
And I don't think I have any.
All right,
I have one.
go ahead.
On the Article 19, you said that it's been determined that they cannot pay the lieutenant overtime for reimbursement. By whose determination?
I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
And see what I can provide you further. I mean, I know that information came to us from HR. I don't know what the tracks are behind that.
It's the argument that they're exempt employees.
Yes, that's
No,
correct.
I understand
Yeah.
that. The problem is, we have a special events unit with one lieutenant. October events alone, and this has happened in prior years, where we had ACL, F1, and football game on the same weekend. That's impossible, first of all, according to our general orders and policy, for one lieutenant to be span of control over that. And so, and all of those are reimbursed events, so the city's not actually coming out of the city's pocket for that. And the ask was only for reimbursed events during specific situations like this, that the ability to be able to follow our policy and have a lieutenant be hired at an already established overtime rate for a lieutenant, to work that. And so I just don't understand like how the span of control issue is addressed by just saying we can't do it by exempt because they're exempt.
It's a fair question, and I will get you a more thorough answer to the question.
All right,
On the other part of 19, with moving towards referring to the new transfer policy,
Yes, sir.
an initial concern that I have is, like, I'll say this, we've collaboratively, right, folks on both sides of this negotiating tables have done a good job of putting together a really good, fair process that we've implemented. The concern that I have is you're one poor leadership decision, management decision away from saying, hey, we're gonna scrap this and go back to, or go to something completely different, or go back to the way that something was. And so that would be my only concern, is that that policy could potentially be changed. So I don't know to what extent that we might be able to solidify down what's there. How do we deal with if there's a desire by the department to change that policy, if that becomes something where we can
We'll take a look at that.
meet and confer
understand.
over a change or?
We understand the concern, we'll look at options.
Perfect. And what was the third change in 19?
The non-addition of the,
Health
Special
special
just
needs.
going to the definition, which is what we had suggested in the first place.
It's okay. Is the intent by having at the chief's discretion, is the intent to give, and this is really just to get an answer on the record, I'll put that out there very plainly, is the intent to have the ability to deny somebody the 20 hours of administration time because the chief could just declare that it doesn't meet a special event? And I'll remind you guys, all we're talking about is a situation where, for whatever reason, we're changing somebody's schedule, not changing what you're doing, right? We're just changing your schedule to accommodate working one of these events because we haven't got enough people to work it on a voluntary basis. And not only are we changing your schedule, but we're changing your schedule and we're not giving you a 28-day notice, right? So, like I've explained this over and over and over to our own members. If the city says, hey, in 29 days, I need you to work an F1 event, full within y'all's rights as managers to change my schedule for me to go work that event. And obviously, we recognize that there's gonna be times when for whatever reason, we don't have that ability, potentially. So is the intent to, by having, this kind of caveat that at the chief's discretion, these things can be categorized as events, is the intent to say, hey, like we have carte blanche to say, was this a special event or not?
So,
Go ahead. You have that?
yeah, so no, that's not the intent. The intent is, we didn't dislike the concept of the definition that you had,
Uh-huh.
but when we looked at the original definition, it said things like where there's a road closure. And, you know, we were just kind of internally, you know, so Uncle Joe's garage sale, you know, that he's having where the road has to be blocked off, would it technically fit in that definition? We thought, well, we've got to tighten up that definition. And we talked to you about that a little at that time, and you came back with a much longer list. So we had our chiefs kind of start going through the list, and it was, you know, 95% of them, they were like, yeah. And they have no problem with giving the 28 days notice with that. I just think in the ever-changing world of the city of Austin, where we're having more and more events every year, that we need to be able to have that list morph into something that is definitionally defined, but somebody has to make that determination, and of course, we are always going to say that person is going to be the chief. So we don't have a problem with the concept of the definition, it's just we tried to tighten it up to where the department would be comfortable with it.
I just don't want to get into the,
It's the event
Into the
that's at
match.
the discretion versus the individual request.
right.
is, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah. I just don't want to get in an argument over, should this event fit a definition or not? And I'll say again, and I've said once at the table before, like, this is not something in the history that we've had this article in the contract, it's been, administrative time has been given once to my knowledge, and it was in the first year that after we had it, and it's not something that we routinely do. It's just a concern that I have as we continue this downward trend of staffing, as we continue to have, I mean, what was it, 2 weekends ago, right? Like we had to pull some on-duty resources to cover some special events, and
Happened last weekend as well.
my fear becomes, like, at some point, if that's no longer an option because we're so busy on patrol, do we have to do this thing? And then if we have to do it for a safety reason, it's not gonna be popular, but I understand that it's within y'all's prerogative as managers. Just wanna make sure that we don't get into an argument over, should these people be given their 20 hours of administrative time or not?
Yeah, I don't think that's the intent at all, I think
not
it's
the
just a
intent.
matter of,
It was too many triggers or uncertainties in the prior definition. We think this captures it. We think the chief's gonna implement it, you know, in good faith. Let me have just, can I have 30 seconds with you, Ben, to ask y'all a question real quick?
yeah.
Make sure that I understand something.
Okay. Let's see what it's like. Yeah.
So I wanted to articulate this for both of your members and for the members of the public to see this process going forward. And I think this is one of the things that having these discussions helps address the trust and confidence between your members, my client, the city manager, police chief, and so forth. The provision, the definition that we have, even though it talks about in the discretion of the chief, in a grievance arbitration under this contract, the standard that an arbitrator would apply is abuse of discretion. And so we could write a contract that said in the sole and absolute discretion of the chief, and that's basically if he made the decision, it's over and done with, and you can't argue with it. But this language means that an arbitrator could say, the chief didn't even pay any attention to the definition. You know, this would have been a covered event. Or here's 9 times where you had a covered event that are identical to this one, and there's no legitimate reason for a distinction. So this is not an unenforceable definition. And I just think it's important for everybody to understand that. When I say the chief's gonna carry it out in good faith, you have a potential remedy if that fails,
Fantastic. Thank you.
okay? And that's why I wanted y'all to understand what we're asking for.
100%.
You bet.
And it's, again, I hope that we don't ever have to give anyone any administrative time, because that means that we're either giving folks 28 days notice or where we're able to staff things into a safe manner without having to change people's schedules.
And in like manner, your earlier question about if we have this policy, which we're currently happy with, what's our assurance that it's not gonna flip? And, you know, under a new chief, a different decision, whatever it is, we immediately said, we'll take a look at that and figure out how we can make that happen.
Yeah,
Okay,
appreciate it.
thank you. Is that everything for now?
Yes.
We're trying to crank through promotions and my hope is that in 30 minutes, 45 minutes? If you guys are open, we'd like to meet back, let's just say an hour, so we can bring back promotions, try to get that
Good.
cleared out of the way. Does that work for y'all?
2:30?
Yes, ma'am?
And you'll send me I sent you our Word document on 16, if you'll send me a Word
These
document.
three.
Yeah, the three.
Okay.
And then I think we could probably bring your response to 14,
Okay.
that hard-hitting change that you made.
Yes, indeed.
Sounds like 25 is just a TA
Yeah.
from our language. And then let's have a conversation about 19. If y'all can do the same, then perhaps we can get 19
Yeah.
settled as
All
well.
right. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Mighty good. We wanted to give you some feedback on a couple of things that we are working on. On the policy question on the special events, we will be preparing some language there that essentially will say that that will go forward under the existing policy model, and that if there's going to be changes to that policy model, that y'all will be included in those revisions. The chief would have the ability on an interim basis, if something came up that needed to be adjusted short-term, to make a change. So we will provide you that language, and
Are you talking about
Transfer policy?
19-2? You mean you started and I didn't catch the front end?
I'm sorry,
19.
19,
All right, you're talking about section 2B or over in 5?
the special events. I
Oh,
didn't have it
special,
in
that's
front
in
of
the 5?
19 2B.
me. Yes.
Oh, 2B, all
Yeah.
right. Well, that's the
I'm sorry,
posting
not
of vacancies.
special events, I'm sorry.
Special events.
The transfer policy.
Yes, okay, that's 2B.
19 is what I'm thinking, and I'm talking about the other one. So the transfer policy as it is, which basically everybody is more or less satisfied with it. I understand that there are probably some ideas about how it could be improved even more. And so we're willing to go forward with the policy as it is, subject to changes that you would be involved in if it's changed, but the chief would have the ability on a short-term basis to make modifications.
As we spoke about that as a team, the one problem that we're gonna run into from both sides collectively is it's my understanding that the current policy, or the current process is set up for specialized units only, and that we have not yet flushed out what that is gonna look like for patrol vacancies. Is that, Shane, is that accurate?
It's set up right now for both, but there is work to still do to revise the patrol part of it. But it's included in there now for patrol.
So
There's a
the,
process right now, but that's the second piece that will be evaluated.
what do you think is a realistic timeframe of when, I guess I'll say this, do you anticipate major change to that process on that side? Or,
There's going to have to be some discussions at the patrol rank to make it feasible for patrol.
Yeah, so typically, what we would have answered you with was, you know, the policy in effect at the time this contract was entered into.
Take a
But we know
snapshot so
that
you know
that's-
what you got.
But we know that that wasn't quite completed, and there's gonna have to be some changes, and they wanted to include your input in that process, like the original process. Is that correct? So that's why we said, subject to,
Correct.
you know, that change. So that's what we were trying to craft. We don't have it crafted, but that's what we're intending to do, is do it how the other process was done. But we knew, because there were changes, we were trying to add that additional language.
Exactly.
You're going to give us some new language?
Yeah, we just don't
Okay.
have it
We're going to
drafted
give it-
yet,
we
we're
just
just
don't
giving
have
you
it.
what's in
Alright.
our head, so you guys can
Alright.
see how we drafted and see if it's
On
what you're thinking too.
5A1, I'm move ahead, we're okay. We're going to go ahead and accept the city's language by having a definition for special events. And we'll accept your explanation that it's grievable for abuse.
In the context of what I said,
Yes.
use of discretion.
Okay. All right. So we're left with 5C on the lieutenant's overtime. You're
We
working
are-
on that?
We are aggressively pursuing a solution and some answers on that question. We're working on that as we saw the clock get to 2:30 to come back and reconvene with
Okay.
y'all. As soon as we get some further answers, we'll let you know.
Okay.
And, you know, what I want to say about that is, that's a problem that needs to be solved, and we're working to solve it.
Okay. And we're up, I think, of course, the TA on the TA in 14, we're fine. And on 25, you accept our language, so those are all tentative agreements.
Okay?
we would like to lay out promotion, if you guys are ready to
We're ready.
move to that.
So, just as a note, this is y'all's proposal essentially the last time, which was June 30th that this was presented. In that proposal, there are several footnotes where it's indicated that you guys were still considering things, you were unsure, you gave us the proposal, but there were some things that you weren't sure about, so I guess we can just facilitate an open discussion here about that. Skip through just a couple pieces to the first one, where you guys proposed no minimum score requirements for the written test. I think in our internal discussions, we feel there's no true consensus. This is it depends on the day, depends on who you ask, how they feel about it, and if you guys want, if this is something that y'all propose, that y'all are committed to trying, then we're willing to give that a shot and see what impact it has on our promotion cycles. Again, that's something you guys noted as something you were considering, so
Yeah.
it's up to you, I guess, at the end.
What is section 5 under? Is that, what rank? Okay,
Yeah, corporal detective.
okay, I'm sorry, I
That-
just wasn't quite acclimated to the.
Right, it was just for the corporal detective rank, which is, again, one that has potentially 300 to 400 people on the list, and I don't think there's a foreseeable situation where we get through that, and if there is, things have gotten a lot worse than what this contract looks like. So that's, again, up to y'all.
Yes.
All right. Bear with me for a moment. The change from 70-30 to 50-50 written test and assessment center for the rank of sergeant, which is currently the only one with the 70-30. Again, we're willing to basically experiment with that and see what the effects are. That was something you guys had proposed, and I know that was in line with Kroll report and some other things that you guys referenced at that time. You guys proposed eliminating the technical skills test and some other things. So we just kind of skipped over that. The next thing this is the commander's portion. This is what you guys, what kind of, we all decided together was the best way to approach this, is just having the commander's test change. One thing to note, and I think it actually comes in later, but the timing and the dates there was going to be some confusion, some issues based on the fact that we thought we might not get to a contract in this calendar year, and so we could potentially collaborate later if we do, in fact, heed this more rapid process that we're going through this week. But if not, we're still committed to doing this in the 2024 cycle with a truncated list in 2023. You guys,
That makes sense to us, and as we go forward and see when things come together, we can always adjust the
Right.
dates. We're setting all the substantive pieces, and we can figure out when do we pull the trigger and what are the dates.
right, we're comfortable with that. So we understand your objection to having the mentorship program be compulsory, and we're fine with that. But we do want this, we do like the fact that the language is in there, that the department does need to facilitate that. It's in line, again, with Kroll and general best practices, and frankly, it will benefit everybody going forward through the department. I think we're seeing success in female officers and other people that are getting mentorship, and we hope to see that continue. So for the rest of the process, there's actually, from what you guys proposed, there's incredibly little that we've changed. The major change is right here. This is in the leadership development program, which is the first formal compulsory step in the process. And the only change that we wanted to make here is where you'll see here it says all ultimate decisions of vendors or providers and minimum requirements of the LDP shall be at the sole discretion of the chief or their designee. And it's not, I guess it doesn't feel incredibly binding, but the use of the word vendor and provider there is something that we're a little bit uncomfortable with. And I wanted to use this just public session as an opportunity to emphasize that there is no prepackaged, one-size-fits-all program that currently exists that I feel that we're trying to work towards. We've emphasized the entire time that this is a holistic, organic process that needs to evolve from the needs of the leadership of the Austin Police Department with the department as we grow from here into the next contract cycle and beyond. And I know there's a company we're currently using called A Deeper Way, which has been successful for a lot of things, I'm sure, but I feel like we want to emphasize that going with or having just one specific provider, one specific vendor will damage the overall positive effects that this program should have. And again, I think the chief of police has tons of management rights, and we can't really limit that, but I do just want to take that language out of here to emphasize that we want this to be holistic. Does that make sense?
Just,
It does, makes perfect sense. Because
So-
you don't want a single mindset.
Exactly.
Well, the chief can make decisions, but you don't want to say that that's, we're buying a cookie cutter or something.
Absolutely. And I'm not trying to negatively, I'm not trying to criticize a deeper way. There are tons of programs, but at the end of the day, this should be a collaborative effort that changes potentially every time it's utilized.
And that would be the goal of the Labor Management Committee that would have to convene within 60 days, is for us to have some really robust conversations about what we want, where we're headed, and how we get there.
Yeah.
It could be through a university, it could be through something that's already in existence, but like Brad said, we just don't want to limit ourselves to a specific company that has a prepackaged program.
yeah,
And-
I understand that from our earlier conversations in our subcommittee.
Yep.
That makes perfect sense.
And to continue ongoing
Correct. Yes, sir.
as it evolves and we learn.
Yep.
So, and here you'll notice the footnote on the review panel, and then, so that'll be the next kind of point of discussion as to whether or not, you guys have had the opportunity to consider that, and what you guys have come up with. Because that was the like most robust part of it that you guys had indicated you weren't sure about, and so that may be the point. This may be an appropriate time for you guys to give feedback on the discussions you've had since then, and give us any feedback that we can discuss here now about what you're uncomfortable about with the review process or the review panel, and maybe we can have that discussion.
I think the general concept was that when we were looking at the Kroll report, they were heavily weighting it to, kind of 50-50 situation. And where the review panel fell into may not be as advantageous toward going toward a more diversified workforce as at least the experts that city council hired were suggesting, and that this may lean in the opposite direction. I think that's kind of, that's about where we were coming
So-
from. So it was more a discomfort. I know you have, it's kind of a new concept, so nobody really knows which way that would go. But I think since we were trying to actually take, we weren't trying to mirror the Kroll report exactly, but we were trying to take their strong suggestions and try to implement them in a way to get the workforce more diversified generally through the testing process and make it a more equitable process from the study that we had, instead of introducing new concepts while we introduce the study before we know if that even works. That's kind of where we were coming from on our discomfort. We understood the concept and didn't hate it, but we really wanted to implement something that had just been studied and just been recommended to us that we haven't yet fully tried.
So we initially had 40, 40, 20, and y'all rebutted with the 45, 45, 10.
Yeah.
And I think we're good with the way it's broken down that way. I think we feel strongly about a need to have some sort of review of one's career, even if it's just a 10% weight. I think that's where we're coming from.
Let us rediscuss that as a group one more time.
Okay.
Because let us rediscuss that.
Okay.
And just to be clear, just so I understand, you're saying that there is the potential for this to negatively impact diversity, but there's really no indication that it will do so, or that it will maybe potentially have a positive impact.
Well, we've had a lot of internal discussions. It could go either way, honestly. I think we just don't know how it would go. So
Right.
I think, let us rediscuss that.
Okay.
We understand kind of both sides of that coin, but
For everybody's, you may already know all this, but for the membership group and the public, historically, the logic and industrial psychology for these kind of things is that the cognitive written examinations were disproportionately have an adverse impact on minority groups and so forth. They were not having a proportionate impact on some ethnic groups and females. But as things played out, and as the Kroll report indicated, the review panel actually flipped in some of the cycles and was going the wrong direction in terms of opening opportunities and making sure that minority candidates were being competitive on the testing process. And so we found out that something that we implemented to try to improve things and enhance opportunity and diversity was actually having negative statistical outcomes.
just to be clear, you mean the assessment center as something that we had already implemented?
This is a bit different.
This is a different thing.
This
I'm
was-
just talking about the
Okay.
Oh,
big
okay.
picture of
Yeah,
industrial
I'm just making sure I
psychology.
understand correctly.
Right. And so that was in response to your question about, you know, whether or not it was gonna have an impact, pro or con, or could have a negative impact. Because I'm merely saying that people in the field are revisiting what they can expect from particular selection models.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I hope that we'll consider that this could be a positive impact, and we understand it could be a negative impact. We're willing to evaluate that over the course of the life of this contract, certainly, and have those discussions. I hope we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on something that we're not really sure about.
Real quick, Brad.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to just reemphasize, like, the association very much has a vested interest in all of our members, right? Having good opportunities and figuring out, like, if you guys remember back to the very first presentation that those guys did on promotions, like, I recognize that I'm going to get pushback from other police associations in the state of Texas if we are able to pass this, right? This is the most management-minded promotions article that a police union in the state of Texas has ever put forward, and we will get pushback from our peers in other cities because I fully expect that guy to take something like this to other cities to say, hey, if it can be done here, we can do it other places. Like, I get that. We are super cognizant of the fact that some people are not leaders of men and women, and we're trying to fix that for our police department. That is our, like, number one driving force behind trying to solve this. And I don't want to negatively impact people. I recognize that through whatever process we were to create, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And we don't want to be in the business of picking winners, right? Or more importantly, of forcing someone down a list. The driving, motivating factor for our team is to just find the best people that can do the job of leading this department, especially in a time of crisis, like, who actually has the chops to get out there on the front lines and lead people through a crisis situation.
Yeah, so let us go back through and talk about that, because the original proposal was more a defend your career sort of thing, and then you kind of morphed through our subcommittee. We kind of worked on changing the structure of that a little bit, and I'm not sure everybody on our team, aside from our subcommittee, is fully aware of how that was changed. So let us discuss that a bit. I think, well, I don't want to make any promises. Let us discuss that.
No worries. So regarding the rest of the commander procedure, I think we are in agreement overall. There aren't any other tweaks, I think, that we were looking for in that process. So the next thing we wanted to get to, you guys proposed this language regarding the assessment center process, and again, I feel like this is something that is more of a contractual issue with the vendor that you guys choose, but if this is something that y'all want in here, we don't have any problem with this. This doesn't adversely affect our membership at all. And I believe this is that same language with the 2 panels instead of 1 panel. I don't think that'll harm our membership. I think that'll help. So we have no problem with that. The last thing to note here, this is just the date that I referenced earlier where this process was going to be enacted after January 1st. If because of a more rapid negotiation cycle we're currently going through is effective, we can implement the process sooner, great. If not, we're fine with this too.
We can just highlight that and footnote it accordingly.
Okay. I believe that's all for promotions, so we'll await your.
Yeah, there was one. You guys have anything to add? Okay.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your work.
We need to take some time and get back to the table to resolve some of these things today. What are y'all thinking?
Yes.
Yep, okay. How much time you want to?
What do we need?
Let us finish our conversation with Brian. We need to, probably an hour and a half. What time is it? 2:15? It's 3 now.
Nearly.
4:30?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Lisa, for Austin, please.
So, Councilman, what's up on the screen, that's what you sent me. It says COA proposal, I'm presuming you sent the correct one, and that just was remarked. Right.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Let me
That's
go
the
back.
one that he sent to me. I don't know what Brad had.
We started the top page. This is what Thomas sent us. I'm just presuming there's not an extra thing at the top with today's date, and that that's the correct one that you guys just.
That's the one he sent to me.
That's just, again, we took what you had proposed to us on the 30th.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure we weren't working from the wrong document.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Scott Perry up to the front
I wasn't
table.
sure who was typing there.
To what do we owe you?
And so with respect to,
Are we on?
with respect to this Article 13 promotions, we've had some extensive discussions on our side. We appreciate this
You
presentation.
want to talk louder?
We appreciate the
For me.
presentation very much. And we appreciate the earlier remarks. I think that it is very true that this article recognizes something that's been a labor management contention in a lot of locations for a long time, and that is that, you know, a plain, simple read a book and take a test is not the way to pick leaders. And we are very pleased with the kind of collaboration that's been done here, exchanging ideas, looking at new techniques and ways to try to do things, so that we can find the people, to use your words, that have the chops to step into the gap and do the right things when, you know, when there are tough decisions to be made. So we're very pleased with this article. We have a number of things that we're sorting out that are kind of loose ends, because conceptually, I think we're on solid ground together about the way we go forward. I think, Chief Perry, you're gonna,
He's all right.
where'd he go? He moved up. Talk about some of the issues and questions that we've got, because we just kind of want to lay these out on the table and see what you think the right answers are, because we're still making our mind up on some of them.
Earlier when you talked about, go down, probably the page, that next page, one more. The minimum score requirements, you specifically, since it's under the section that is corporal detective, and that's what it's referencing there, what is your belief, or is it your intent that that be carried all the way through sergeant, lieutenant, and commander, or only applied to corporal detective?
So I think it's, and if I'm speaking out of turn, let me know, but I think it's most appropriate for that rank, for the corporal detective rank only, because the volume of participants is so high that it will have, if it's going to have an impact, it will have a minimal impact, and again, like minimally adverse or negative impact. Something that we all talked about, and I don't know if you guys will remember, is that the composite score have to be above a certain percentage, and we talked about the fact that 70 might not be the right percentage just because that's, you know, traditionally what's done in academic settings. But if the composite, I do believe for sergeants, for lieutenants, and then through the commander process, that a composite score does have to reach some sort of minimum threshold, because, again, those ranks are not to say more important ranks, but the leadership component that we expect to derive from that should be something to be attained, not necessarily just based on the number of applicants, because in certain years there might be fewer people interested or available or eligible to participate. So the composite score, there should be some minimum for the detective corporal test. I think we're comfortable with that.
I just want to make sure I completely understand. So the corporal detective, minimum score, no minimum score on the test. On just the written part of the test for lieutenant, sergeant, lieutenant, commander, does there need to be a minimum score on that? Or is it the combined composite score is what will actually have to have that minimum threshold?
So the way that you guys proposed it to us was that there would be a minimum score on the written test only. That would move you to the next part of the process. And then that was, I think, what we had envisioned. But if you, I think we could entertain the idea of a minimum composite score only with no necessarily minimum on the written test, as long as you far outperform on the assessment center and the career review and the commander's process.
I would agree. I think what makes this unique, this particular part, is with the detective corporal exam, you only have one metric really, right? It's the written test. So I think this is a rank where, seniority does kind of come into play a little bit more, which is kind of, I think, part of the idea here. But, I agree.
This is also their first look at this process. It's the first time they're taking a written exam to promote within our police department. So, maybe somebody's not a good tester, maybe they don't have experience testing in this environment. And so it gives more senior people an opportunity to still be part of the promotions process, even if the score isn't commensurate with their experience.
Okay. And then one other thing, I was reading through the review panel on the commander's section, and you had struck the part where it discussed the panel being actually able to question the candidates. Is that, am I reading that correctly? That you do
Y'all struck
Y'all
that.
struck that.
That was our
Yes.
strike?
Yes. And actually,
I thought it said Thomas on it, that's why I was confused.
no, I think we had discussed internally that if we were to get, of course, everything we wanted out of this, then we would have questions asked. You guys in those internal, or in those collaborative discussions mentioned that it could lead to a free-for-all, and that would be probably not ideal for anybody. Now, if we were gonna maybe look down the road and see what we would do with this process in the future, I think some sort of accepted list of accepted questions, a question bank, or maybe even a predetermined list would be an effective kind of intermediary. But if y'all don't want to entertain that idea for this, we accept just the career review as it is written, but we're open to those discussions as well, adding those questions back in.
Yeah, now that you say that, HR absolutely said no. And yes, we can look at that maybe next time. But
Just for the record, I think it's doable to have questions, but they just would have to be kind of how we're doing our transfer policy now. Like, each question has to be the same question for each person that goes through the review. But
Right,
I don't-
and, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Try to blame me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And so our plan is to put together a counter proposal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that there were just a couple of
Right.
places in the review panel where it still said board instead of panel, and just a little
Yeah,
cleanup,
it's just
little things.
language cleanup. There's still a couple places where it says, where it talks about minimum passing score on test, and it may not say 70%, but it said minimum passing, so that we're just gonna clean all that stuff up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any substantive changes that y'all foresee bringing?
No, I think we'll add the composite at the other level, but yeah, everything else is, I think, in line with what we had discussed.
Great.
Okay, then, I think we're ready to put our monetary proposal on the table.
You control it? Can we get it a little bit bigger? Can anybody see it?
I can't see it.
Since they don't have it in front of them. So, this is our proposal to you for this labor agreement, and we are putting these economic benefits and changes on the table in conjunction with the context for our efforts to structure a new model for the way that the OPO reviews police oversight, but in recognition of the immediate priority that we need to continue to move forward with recruiting and hiring new personnel, bringing them into the department, getting them trained, putting them on the street. And that's why we believe a 4-year contract is in the best interest of your members, our city government, our citizens, and so forth. We are proposing a 4% base wage change starting in January. If I remember correctly, the current contract has a January starting date for the base wage changes, and so we've tracked that. We're proposing the following year for 2% in the anniversary of that January increase, another 2% in year 3, and another 2% in the 4th year of the labor agreement. And we've got our transparent annual numbers and the 4-year cumulative cost of those base pay changes. In addition, because of the focus that we have on bringing people in, getting individuals trained, putting them on the street and restoring staffing in APD, we're proposing an FTO increase from $175 to $200 a month to take place in April of 2023, and that shows that in the year 1 and 2 costs. We're also proposing shift differential stipend to increase by $25 up to $325 in April of 2023 with the respective costs there. We have the offset or reduction in the mental health certification in year 3 because of the objective of the department. We're moving toward having everybody in the department with the mental health officer certification. And so instead of having incentive pay for that, that's just one of the things that are a part of the job requirements. And then it shows the total 4-year cumulative cost of the agreement. We have analyzed the market, as you know. You're familiar with the market study. We have looked at the other compensation from cities throughout the state that have implemented additional changes during the time that we've been here in the bargaining cycle. And we believe that this keeps the city of Austin competitive, keeps us in the range of the top of market definition that we've used in the past. And we want to move forward and see if we can't make a deal on money and get these other issues resolved so that we can go forward and restore some stability, have consistency in the expectations of personnel. And so that's our pay proposal. We'd be glad to answer questions about this. We have a draft of the wages and benefits article, which we're finalizing, and I believe it's ready to send. Is that correct? Any other changes or modifications?
I think so. It will be within the
It will
hour.
be soon.
A
so.
point of clarification. You're offering all of this money at January starts?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's less than 10%. Well, when you knock the first 3 months off the budget, you're only getting about 75% for the year. So it's way less than 10%. Because 10% every each year, but then you don't start till January, you get 3 months off. So annualized, the cost is going to be way less than that.
So these costs are annualized across. I don't,
But if I owe you $10 and I don't pay you to April, but I owed you in October, the cost to me for savings for budget, I want to budget but $10, but not till April. So if I move into January, instead of paying October 1st, when the budget starts, when most people get their raises, you're saving 3 months every year. And that's annualized. You don't, the city's not putting up 10%.
no, we understand that we're not modifying it from the current language.
No, I'm asking you if that's your intent.
That
It
it
is.
be January each
It's to
year,
pay,
yes.
so you're offered 10%, but starting in January, so every year, it's not a 4, it's not a 2 for the cost of the city.
But it's a 4 and a 2 and a 2 for the 12 months from the last base pay change.
But you're moving from October 1st to January.
No, it's currently
No,
January.
it's currently January 1.
The budget,
The pay increases in the current
current
agreement.
contract.
well, I understand. Okay, but, all right, I understand your position.
And I did just want to make that clear, that the percentages represent the 12 months from the current anniversary date that's in the labor agreement.
That's the current contract. All right, I understand your position.
On FTO and shift diff, can you walk me through the thought process of kicking that out to April?
Just to put as much money into base wages as we could afford.
Okay.
On the front end, that's correct.
So just recognizing that it's gonna be half the cost that first year.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it frees up money.
Yeah. And that's why it kind of shows in both years as.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Gistel schooled me on that back in 2017, 2018.
For the FTO stipend, I see that it's $25 now. Was it $25 in your previous proposal, or was it the 50? I wrote down 50, I'm just not sure. if
It was 50 in our
25
previous proposal, and again, when we tried to put more at the base wage so that the total would be more, we moved 25 of that to the base wage.
Okay.
All right. We don't need a long caucus, but let's take 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Go outside.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take about 5 or 10 minutes. We'll go
Mighty good.
outside and I'll be back.
You want us to just wait then, right?
Yes, please.
Mighty good. We'll be here.
Is that us? Oh, that's the chief. All right. Your order's ready at Wendy's. All right. Are we ready, Mr. Park? All right. And I'll make my own personal deals. The president can say what he wants to say. I find your economic offer, it's insulting. It's insulting. It doesn't change anything. It's a wage increase that's substantially lower than even the cost of living. We've already told you that your market study, if you're paying, let's say, $10 an hour, but you can't hire any workers for $10 an hour, well, then you got to raise the money. This offer will continue a decline in recruiting and retention, and Austin is at a tipping point, and you can look around the country at the articles, and people reach a point at which they can't get back from. They're down thousands of people. And you're not going to fix it by saying, we're going to give you a 10% over the next 4 years, but inflation's 7%. Even assume it goes back down to 5%. No one's going to say, I'm going to come here. When I just did a deal in Beaumont, the city council just signed off yesterday. I realize it's a smaller place, but a lot poorer place. And they're getting compressed wages down. Some officers are getting 15 and 20% down at the level where we're trying to keep them from quitting and putting more money on hiring. It's going to be over 16% cumulative in Beaumont. San Antonio came off of more than a 16% raise. And that council approved that, and that's helped them slow down people quitting and being able to help them in retention. It's not a realistic offer. We're here to bargain. I'll accept it as your proposal, and whenever the next scheduled meeting is, we'll show up at that, and we're here to bargain over it. But today, that didn't show anything of which you're in an expedited position to get a deal. You're not. So if you want a deal, then we need to have a real discussion about money. I think we've given you a pretty well thought out plan. We think it helps to keep those young officers from quitting on us and going to, every neighboring city. And it will give the chief the ability to go out and bring young men and women into the police department and say, we pay the best because we demand the most. It is the most observed and scrutinized police department in the state and one of the top in the nation. That's fine, but that comes at a price of who we have to recruit and who we have to keep. So I would say I appreciate it. I don't think you stop for a moment, and you couldn't be serious that you think that people are going to stay here when every major neighboring city is offering more than that. So I think we're done for the day, and we'll see you at the next bargaining session, and we'll work on these things. And hopefully we'll come to a deal. We're here to get a deal.
We want to get a deal. I've said this more than once. Like, I could agree to lots of stuff conceptually here at the table. It's important that we're able to get a deal that I can pass our membership, that I can get past our membership. And last week, when I asked this team to kind of join me on this ride, to figure out, hey, is there a way to get an expedited contract? Is there a way that we could jump through some of these hurdles? Some of these folks, they're here, right? But they didn't. They weren't they weren't as on board then as they are today. And so, recognizing that we have, it's just a different world that our people are living in today than any other time that we've ever negotiated a contract in the history of the APA in the city of Austin. Like, trying to make sure that we get this thing right, because the last thing that I want to do is to TA something and then one of the sides vote it down. And so, I want us to be under contract. I don't want us to fall out of contract. It's not a desire that I have in the least bit. I just don't know that package gets us there with our membership. I don't believe that I could take conceptually the deal that we have structured with all the things that we have in our membership's mind given up, and get it passed with a pay package like that. We want to get a deal. Like, that's,
We appreciate that attitude. We'll keep working together and listening to each other and trying to figure out where it works. We understand it's tough.
Have you set a session, I know we'd blocked some dates for November 1st, and then we have another date in November and at least two in December.
Yeah, we haven't canceled any of those.
No, I'm holding them, so I would assume our next session would be November the 1st.
Tomorrow.
No, tomorrow's not November 1st, is it?
No.
No, we have scheduled for tomorrow and Friday.
Yeah, but I'm not coming back to this unless you plan to go back and come back with a real wage offer. Otherwise, we'll see you on the 1st, our regular. This was extended in a hope to get a deal. Obviously, that's not what you're giving us, won't do it.
Well, and we're prepared to be here tomorrow and to keep moving
Well,
toward a solution.
we're not on a game plan that this can be done by Friday. It's not going to be done by Friday, or you'd have brought a real wage offer in today. So we don't have time and expedited for nickel-dime proposals. We're willing to move in bold moves, but this isn't if you'd come in and we'd been within some point or two, then we'd think, okay, we have a deal, or can get a deal. There's no way to get a deal this week from your position, and we're not going to counter, we gave you a fair offer, and you're not within 10 miles of that offer. So I'd like to see you on November the 1st, and we'll continue. You got the same council sitting here until January. We're not on a timeline. We could settle in one day, we can settle in next year. But we're here to bargain, and we think you've bargained on issues, and we are moving it. But we're not moving at a pace to get through the rest of this agreement. So it's your call. You're the president, but
I know that we've got a lot of work to do with our membership because our phones have already been blowing up since we stepped out in the hallway with this, with people that are viewing this and stuff. So, and I know that they're going to be angry about this, and obviously, and so we've got a lot of work to do with that as well. And if your phones aren't blowing up on that side of the table, from the folks with the department and stuff like that, then that are insulted by this, it's just reality hasn't hit you on the dire straits that we're in this organization, the manpower issues and retention and everything else.
So I don't see how delay gets us into a better position.
we're sitting here, if you want to come back with a real wage offer, but I'm not going to show up tomorrow and you say, well, how about 3? Well, way before. I'm not countering that offer. So put a real money on the table and we'll continue discussing. But we hadn't even heard your reply to 16. We got 10 other articles of which you've had for a year and haven't even bothered except say no. I'm okay with you switching and saying yes, but somebody's going to have to start saying yes.
Part of it is about respect and respecting the time. We don't get paid for doing this job. All of us have our 40 hours that we have to put in a week, some of us 60 hours. It just depends on what you're doing. In addition to this, in addition to kids, families, all of that stuff, and I get it, but it's very disrespectful because we've been here since November. We've been here since January. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, this becomes an emergency. And so we have to sit here and beg the question, what's been going on for the last however many months? And now it's an emergency, but it's not really our emergency with that proposal. That does not create an emergency for me to get something done. But what is an emergency and what is important are my people that work for me, because I'll be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. My family that I have to take care of, and all of these folks that take care of their people at work. And it just really comes across as being very disrespectful use of our time in this process.
You need to caucus?
Yeah, well, we certainly need to have a discussion and then we'll respond.
Well, our intent's to
Our
be here on
expectation was
November the
we were gonna
1st.
Be here tomorrow.
We're not,
So-
I'm not coming tomorrow.
Well, I've heard that.
We'll be here November 1st.
But
You're welcome to
that's the
call me
first-
tonight.
That's the
and-
first we were aware of that, so let us.
No, you were
let us-
aware of it, Lowell, when you put that offer on the table.
I was not aware that we weren't gonna come back and continue our
We're
discussions
not going
tomorrow.
to reach a fake deadline. It's not our deadline. You have a deadline, I understand. We don't. We're here to bargain, we got all the way to March.
Okay.
And we're prepared to do that, and we're not arguing bargaining in bad faith, because on other issues, are slowly reaching a deal. But there's so much undone by the surface bargaining we've been sitting through for the last 6 months. Everybody's peddling around, not wanting to move, and now we're moving. Okay, if you want to move quickly, you got to make it move, and you're not going to do it like, well, I'll put this, and maybe they'll come back with this, and I'll come back. It's not. So if you're not willing to get over where we're at on the wages we work through and think we have to sell and compete, then there's no point in otherwise. We get it. I think we'll get a deal before the end of the year. I hope so. We're not going to get it Thursday or Friday unless you're planning to come back and make a bold move and put real money on the council gave themselves 40%. You gave all the city workers 4%, and you put 4 on, but you're hemorrhaging police officers. And the cost to replace them is astronomical in this world. It's not just Austin's problem. The whole country is, people just don't want to do this job, so we have to pay, and then we have to get the type of person that will work in this community and will do it the way the citizens want it done. We're doing it, but we're not going to do it by making a substandard wage offer that'll put them further behind their competitors. So, well, you have my decision.
So
I'll
it
be here on
sounds-
November 1st.
Yeah,
and-
it sounds like what you're saying is that, because you just used the term or the phrase, put them further behind the other cities.
Yes.
Not behind. How can you believe you're behind the other cities?
I
San
can,
Antonio's
Yeah.
pay raise catches up some with Austin.
that's correct. But-
Catches up.
Well, I don't know of them getting an average of 4% a year over 4 years. And secondly,
That actually is included in the study that we gave you, is their current.
well, here's my,
contract
I'll go back to the
with their
same
current
question.
services.
If what you're doing isn't working, what you offered isn't working, it doesn't matter if you're number one. If you can't hire anybody,
But I just
you
don't-
got to pay the rate that will hire people.
Understand that principle.
And so, the pay study, we disagree on where it's at, because we can look at all the total compensation, the cost of living, and all those factors. Austin is slowly slipping back, but it wouldn't even matter, because you can't fill the classes at what you're offering, and what you're putting on the table will not achieve that. That's the truth. So if I got to pay $20 an hour to get someone to come to Wendy's, and I'm offering 15, I can't fill it, well, then you're going to pay 20, or you're not going to have them. What you're offering and what you're paying is not filling the classes to the rate of which we need to catch up.
I understand that argument.
Okay, well, I'm
I was
telling you.
merely observing.
Well,
that
then
The members of this department are not behind the other cities in Texas.
I believe they are in many places.
Thank you for the
Well-
candid feedback.
And I'll see you on November 1st if you decide to show up.
We will come back in a minute if that's okay.
Well, all right, take your break, then we'll take ours. Why don't you just text me when you're ready? think she quit. I just saw her throw her pen down the hall. I'm not making any assertions. Here she is.
Are we ready? Thank you very much. So appreciate y'all waiting. I appreciate you coming back. We are obviously disappointed. We understand the tenor of the position and the emotions that are involved. We do believe that 4% in January is something that we ought to make happen. We believe that we have made a pay proposal that recognizes the actual position of Austin police officers in the major city market in Texas. We are ready to continue having discussions with you and trying to make an agreement on pay. We had hoped that we could go forward on this short-term basis. And I'll personally say that, you know, I'm sorry for my part if that's been a misread. It was never our intention to cause consternation by the plan to move forward in the time frame that we were talking about and to accomplish a labor agreement in short order so that we could move ahead with both stability and an enhanced pay scale. We understand what you've told us about the pay scale. There are true, real challenges about available funds. Believe it or not, your members, I understand, will have very strong views and opinions about that. They look at these other communities, but the truth is that those other communities are still catching up. In any event, we're going to do what we can. I very much welcome the comments that you're prepared to come back and bargain and negotiate. Obviously, we had hoped we could continue this week. We will be back here on November the 1st. We will evaluate all of the items that are outstanding. I think that very few of them are substantive or problematic or holding up anything else. And I think fundamentally, we need to resolve the key pieces of this puzzle and try to go forward and solve this problem as quickly as we can. We do believe that the future is better off with a labor agreement in place as soon as we can get together with the meeting of the minds. And any other piece of the puzzle? We would say that if there's anything, I was a little surprised at the comment about outstanding articles. We don't think there are 10 outstanding articles that are in controversy. If there's something that you have some consternation that we haven't given you a response, you feel like we've just said no or whatever, we want to know ahead of time so that when we get here, if there's something that we can get you an answer on or resolve, because we are looking for ways to find a satisfactory compromise and a middle ground. If there's things we can say yes to, in spite of the challenges we have on available funds, then we want to take a look at that. We've spent a good bit of time trying to find solutions and things to say yes to, including the lieutenant issue, which we talked about earlier, which we are chasing literally as we leave.
Yeah. We'll take just like one out in the hallway caucus, but let me just.
It's all right.
And I'll put all this in writing to you. Setting aside just the wage issue, we still have overtime, special leave, holiday vacation, association business leave. We're talking promotions. There were some things in management rights of which we disagreed. We still have language on the table over the grievances. We haven't even gotten into the substantive of 1718. We've exchanged proposals, but they haven't worked through all of those. And we did get 25. So can it all be done quickly? Yes.
Okay.
But we'll get that in order, and before we meet, we will have a clear outline of where we have unresolved issues.
That's constructive, and I thank you for that.
All right, you want to just step over, you just prepared to go ahead and make a statement?
Yeah, let's step out for a second.
All right, just 1 second, we won't be long. never off.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're all yours.
All right, I appreciate your comments. And I said this earlier, and I'll just reemphasize it. Things are where they are. I think on issues when we're focused, we think the city is bargained in good faith. On there are issues of which, for whatever reasons, were not dealt with to now, but that's okay, we get it, and we're focused. So I appreciate it. I think the only structural failure is that we wanted to do it, you wanted an expedited deal, we tried it, it's not working right now, and sometimes that doesn't happen. But we have 4 more meetings set, and surely we can get at least everything resolved, if we don't, except that maybe we'll have a few big issues, or we can get all the things resolved. But we have plenty of time now, and we will, if you have things you want us to concentrate on or counters, then I'd appreciate getting them. I will prepare for our team where I think the things left that we have unresolved, and maybe the city didn't comment or just said no at the time, or we'll look at this later. We'll get all of those in order, and I'll send them to you. And then we'll know when we come in on the 1st, we can concentrate on how many of those can we reach agreement on or not. So I appreciate your time, and I'm optimistic. We still can get a deal.
All right, very good.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank
that
you.
positive conclusion, and we will see y'all on the 1st.
We'll be here. 10 o'clock, is it